Howdy, folks. Welcome back to another edition of Bite-Sized Kierkegaard. It's been a while. There's been some life events I don't want to get into, but I'm safe and things are well. I'll be in this temporary location for a little bit. Actually, I think I like this lighting better anyway here, so I'm happy with this. You can see my beard has grown a little bit. Probably will be shorter in the next video, but it's keeping me warm through this winter. But yeah, anyway, life events and life goes on, but some struggles and so forth, which it's kind of appropriate. The previous video was called "Every Good and Perfect Gift." You can click back on that and listen to that if you want. But one of the teachings there that was hard was that even in suffering, like these things are gifts from God, and struggling to understand that myself in the midst of events. So, what was the meaning of it? Was this really a gift from God? So, trying to bring my heart to terms with that. Anyway, so I'm struggling with that. But today we have another difficult teaching. Love will hide a multitude of sins. So what does that mean? And then just for some context, as always, I think this is useful. This was published as part of 3 upbuilding discourses in October 1843, the exact same day that Kierkegaard published Fear and Trembling under a pseudonym. The difference, again, is that these 3 upbuilding discourses were actually published in Kierkegaard's name. So this is part of his direct communication, and he's claiming ownership to this. And this is also a little bit of his way of obfuscating things and hiding. Because he would think people would say, like, no one could write all of this at the same time, and no one would publish it on the same day. In any case, but yeah, so a little bit of a context there, and this consists of these 3 upbuilding discourses. 2 of them have the exact same title, and we're going to go over one of those today. And the title is "Love Will Hide a Multitude of Sins." And they're both based upon the same epistle in the Bible, 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 7 through 12. So I think we'll start with that, and then we'll get into what Kierkegaard is saying about this. So, the end of all things is near. Therefore, be serious and discipline yourselves for the sake of your prayers. Above all, maintain constant love for one another, for love covers a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another without complaining. Like good stewards of the manifold grace of God, serve one another with whatever gift each of you has received. Whoever speaks must do so as one speaking the very words of God. Whoever serves must do so with the strength that God supplies, so that God may be glorified in all things through Jesus Christ. To him belong the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen. So these 2 discourses, Kierkegaard calls them, are based on that passage. And this first one, it starts out with a really long section, which is long, but I think it's worth reading because it's just emphasizing, like, love plays a pretty big deal in the world. What is it that makes a person great, admired by creation, well-pleasing in the eyes of God? What is it that makes a person strong, stronger than the whole world? What is it that makes him weak, weaker than a child? What is it that makes a person unwavering, more unwavering than a rock? What is it that makes him soft, softer than wax? It is love. And he goes on, and it's a long paragraph. It is love. It is love. Love. Even these dichotomies in the world. It is love. It is love. Just emphasizing, like, this is a pretty important thing in the world. And also, it goes on saying, like, yeah, the pagans had love too, but this is a more nuanced. This is a special, more powerful form of love. A love that even has the capability to cover up a multitude of sins. So what does that mean? So this is kind of broken down into 3 parts. So that's the way I'm going to present it today. The first part is emphasizing love is kind of just blind, right? Love hides these imperfections. And it's your way of looking at the world, basically. It breaks it down here on page 277. It does not depend then merely upon what one sees, but what one sees depends upon how one sees. All observation is not just a receiving, a discovering, but also a bringing forth, and insofar as it is that how the observer himself is constituted and is indeed decisive. So like this person, the way they see the world influences, the way a person is influences how they see the world. And this is emphasized on page 278. When evil lives in the heart, the eye sees offense. But when purity lives in the heart, the eye sees the finger of God. The pure always see God. But, quoting, he who does evil does not see God. End quote. It's very, very reminiscent again of, the Buddhist concept of see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. The idea is the idea that what's going in to you is not just a passive thing. It's something where it goes into you, and your judgment upon it becomes the way you see the world. So this is a little bit of a tangent, but there is an idea of like no thinking or no judgment in Buddhist concepts, and it's precisely because of that. It's because as soon as you start, judging those perceptions that come in, or judging people, or judging the world, you're going to make these judgments about things that cast light on how you see the world. So that it's quite a different concept here. The idea here is to take it in and see it in terms of love. So you are judging, you're casting kind of, it's like seeing the world in rose-colored glasses, right? It's like forcefully seeing the good in the world, and that is actually affecting your perception of everything. So taking things with patience, or I struggle with this too. Like driving around in traffic, it's very easy to be ticked off by people. It's easy to fall into road rage, right? But like you're seeing things differently. You're thinking, well, maybe that person is driving crazy because maybe they have some emergency that I have no idea about. That's an extreme example. The more likely thing is like, well, this person is having a rough day. They're not like this all the time. They don't drive crazy all the time. Today, you're seeing the worst of this person. This is maybe the worst day in the whole year, or even just in the whole week, right? But like, let's give them the benefit of a doubt, and just be patient. And that's the way of like you're responding in a way because you've taken it with love, and you're saying, well, let's be more patient, right? So that's the idea of like, yeah, this person might be doing something terrible, and maybe putting others in risk of driving crazy, right? But I'm going to choose to see it in a way that lets me see it in a positive way, to see it with love. And that's a difficult thing to do, especially with more extreme examples, right? But yeah, and yeah, it's interesting too. So another little aside, but I'm taking a class in Chinese philosophy, and Confucius is all about what's called partial caring, basically like covering up the sins of the father, and the father covers up the sins of the son. There's a family relationship. The family is important there, so like they sort of like help each other out, but it's the same idea that they're sort of covering up for each other out of love, and they're protecting each other. Love will hide a multitude of sins. It's the same idea, like the people are looking out for each other, but you're doing it in this case like for everyone, and you're seeing the world with that, not just for your family, as Confucius would say. So it's an interesting idea here. Let's move on to the second part here. So this is Kierkegaard's strategy of sermonizing. He's going to repeat, love will hide a multitude of sins, and then put a little different lens on it. And this lens is the endurance of love, that like the multitude is there. The multitude of those sins is there. So love needs to endure. Love needs to keep, love covers up once, and then it happens again. Love needs to cover up again and not get tired and worn out, right? Love endures all things, and indeed, as he says on 281, does not weary of believing all things, hoping all things, enduring all things. So that the endurance is a important concept there. Page 282, love could forgive 70 times, 7 times, and sin grew weary of occasioning forgiveness more quickly than love grew weary of forgiving. So there's sin in the world, there's love in the world, but love is enduring. Sin is getting tired because it's just like, okay, whatever. But love endures because it's stronger. It's going to win out. And that indeed leads to that next section, this third section. Love will hide a multitude of sins again. But love is in the balance with the sins of the world, right? There's a lot of sins in the world, and there's a lot of love in the world. And so there's this sort of constant fight, right? But love has its place with sin. It coexists in the world with it. So it's sort of like love's legions versus enemies' legions, as he says it. But I think the idea here is you continue to endure and you continue to put out love in there, and it's this ongoing fight between the sin of the world and the love of the world. But the interesting idea here is that you could actually influence the environment too. I'm going to quote something here, and I'm going to bring it back again to help put it in context. Just an example here. An elderly pagan, in this case is a reference to bias. An elderly pagan, named and acclaimed in paganism as a sage, was sailing with an ungodly man on the same ship. Oh boy. Well, when the ship was in distress at sea, the ungodly man lifted up his voice to pray, and the sage said to him, "Be quiet, dear fellow. If heaven discovers that you are on board, the ship will capsize." Is it not true, then, that the guilty can cause the destruction of the innocent? But then is it not the opposite just as true? So what he's saying is this guy on the boat is worried that okay, this guilty guy, heaven's gonna have it out for this guy and try to capsize the boat because this guy is no good, right? But the good or the guilty can harm the good in the world, right? And they have that influence on the world, and they're putting out that. But Kierkegaard was saying, well, can't you do the opposite? Can't you say the opposite too? The good that's put out in the world, doesn't that help those guilty folks, right? And I see it again using the same analogy. If you forgive me, the road rage thing. It's really easy to see how actually it's surprising, but people can really push each other's buttons and get folks really agitated by putting out this bad energy and these bad vibes, and start driving crazy, and it'll make other people drive crazy, and people try to chase each other and race each other. I'm from LA, by the way, if you can't tell. This is a big part of LA culture. They play these games on the road, and people get hurt, right? But it's really easy to put that evil out into the world, and it will grow, it'll become manifest, and it'll spread out, right? And it's easy to see that because those are the extremes. But and I've had this conversation with my friend before too, that the opposite is also true. It's just that it's not as visible, right? You can actually put out a lot of good into the world, and you can set an example for goodness, and this is that suggestion, I think, that by putting that good out there, it actually influences the environment for the better. But unfortunately, it's not always as plain to see as the evil that spreads. So a little unfortunate, but it's saying that love is coexisting with sin in the world, but you got to continually put it out there, put out the love. So just to wrap up here, I'm just gonna read at basically summarizing. Sin discovers a multitude of sins. If you have that sinful heart, you're going to discover those sins in other people, and you're going to see the bad in everything, right? You're going to have that bad attitude. That was the purpose of the first part, that your perception is important here, and if you have that good perception, you're going to discover love in everything. But if you have bad perception, you're going to discover the sins in everything, and sins in the world. Because sin discovers a multitude of sins, but love hides a multitude of sins. Yes, even before the eyes of sin, love hides a multitude of sins. Because with one word from the Lord, the Pharisees and the scribes were silenced, and there was no accuser anymore. There was no one who condemned her. But Jesus said to her, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more, for the punishment of sin breeds new sin, but love hides a multitude of sins." So even here, a suggestion that actually, like, the punishment is going to do no good. You have to put out the love in the world, and that will be the way people will become virtuous through that. And I'm putting my spin on this again because, like, this is a very Confucian thing. Confucius was very against punishment and military and punishing. He says this is the wrong way to do things. The right way to do things is actually like uphold the good, the virtuous people, and let them set the example. And I think Jesus is really saying the same thing here. Sin no more. Because the punishment of sin breeds new sin, but love hides a multitude of sins. So wow, okay. And again, another thing is like I think it could be also applied to Stoicism, right? Your perception of the world, how you internalize things, how these outside things that happen are ideas that are in your mind that can't hurt you if you internalize them correctly, right? And you have that love, right? Which is what Kierkegaard is saying here. So yeah, interesting stuff. So this was Love Will Hide a Multitude of Sins, part 1. The next one will have the exact same title, but it will be part 2. So stay tuned for that next time. And thanks again for joining me. And I'll see you next time, hopefully. Thank you. All right, bye.